Well, one of today's key developments in the coronavirus outbreak, the confirmation that another 39 people aboard that quarantine cruise ship in Japan have now tested positive for what is officially known as COVID-19. We don't have any breakdown of nationalities, but we do know that 8 Canadians are among the 174 cases on the Diamond Princess, the ship outbreak now the largest anywhere outside of China. Well, for more on this, we are reaching right now out to Alison McGeer, Dr. Alison McGeer in Toronto. She's an infectious disease specialist, also clinical scientist with Sinai Health System, and she joins us in Toronto. So, Dr. McGeer, thank you for joining us again today.
Nice to talk to you, Michael.
Listen, I want to begin here with a comment that we got from Dr. Richard Shabas. Of course, you know him very well, former Chief Medical Officer of Ontario. He was talking about the ship quarantine, and this was before those numbers jumped up in the overnight hours. Take a listen to what he told us yesterday.
The disease is spread within the cruise ships. Cruise ships are notorious breeding grounds for infectious disease outbreaks, whether it's norovirus or respiratory outbreaks. So there's probably a higher attack rate of coronavirus on this cruise ship than anywhere else in the world.
And I have to say, he was saying that because he was questioning whether or not this quarantine was actually effective. In fact, his point of view was a quarantine like this does not make any sense. What's your take on that?
So I think people are still in the mode of trying to make sure that we've done everything we can with public health measures to control transmission before we walk away and say this cannot be controlled with public health interventions and we're just going to have to learn to live with the virus. As long as we're doing that in the setting where there's an outbreak, as there clearly is on this cruise ship, we need to be using measures that limit the spread of the virus. And it's obviously a very challenging situation, a large number of passengers and crew, and finding a place where they can be separated and isolated, as we're doing with many other people around the world, has been really difficult. It's absolutely true that cruise ships are relatively crowded places. We know they're an issue for a variety of infectious diseases, but that's cruise ships in their regular position, not cruise ships where everybody's in quarantine. And I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that because of the incubation period of the disease, the time from when you're exposed to when you get sick, we're still looking at people who were likely infected before the quarantine was imposed on the ship. So during normal ship activities, and we knew that when the first 30 cases were declared that there were actually going to be a lot more cases. We were just going to have to wait and see whether people got sick. If people continue to get sick in the coming days, then we will know that there's ongoing transmission on the ship despite the quarantine, and something will have to be done about that. But at the moment, I don't think we have evidence that says that the quarantine on the ship is not working. No question that the quarantine is really unpleasant and difficult for lots of people. But as long as we're in control mode around the world, there aren't a lot of options about what people can do.
Mm-hmm. But compare for us the type of quarantine we're seeing on this cruise ship versus what, for example, we're seeing at CFB Trenton, because it seems that, and I hear the argument that you're making that some of these people already may have had the virus even before they were symptomatic. But compare what we're seeing on the cruise ship versus the type of quarantine and isolation that we're seeing at CFB Trenton.
They're essentially identical. The only problem is that on the cruise ship, there's much less space, right? So you see exactly the same thing. People are staying in their rooms. Everybody's trying to get services to them safely. And when it's possible, people are being allowed out, but when they're allowed out, they're being kept at a distance. The big difference for me is that a hotel in Trenton just has so much more space in it, so much more flexibility, and a much smaller number of people in quarantine. So everything is a lot easier. This very large cruise ship is a huge challenge.
Would it have been better to have disembarked the passengers on this cruise ship and perhaps put them in a hotel where they might have more space than they would in an enclosed environment like a ship offshore of Yokohama?
So my understanding is that we're talking about something like 3,000 passengers and another 1,000 crews. So we're not talking a hotel. We're talking a very large number of hotels. And hotel rooms are, for some people, they'll be bigger than what they have, but it's probably actually more difficult to allow people outside for brief periods of time in a hotel than it is on a cruise ship. So I think you could have made the case that would be possible. It's not totally clear to me that that would be better.
So if it is found that there is person-to-person transmission inside the ship, does that mean then that the quarantine period would have to be extended for the passengers on board the Diamond Princess?
I think as with so many other things during this outbreak, what's happening on the cruise ship is day-by-day decision-making by a whole lot of experts who there's at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, there's a whole cruise ship division that looks at how you make decisions about these things. And so there are a lot of very smart people trying to do their best. And I think every day they look at the challenges for the day and what's likely to come in the next few days and try to make some decisions. So I think it's possible that quarantine might be extended on the cruise ship if there are more cases. It's possible also that people might try to find, as you say, other mechanisms of more effectively separating people if that happens. It's going to be difficult to know for a few days whether the cases which we know that there were cases who were infected before this happened. So we know that at least most of the cases so far will have been exposed and infected before the quarantine was imposed. Because the incubation period is somewhat variable, there's going to be a period of time where we're not going to know whether people are newly acquiring disease during the isolation procedures or whether people are were exposed 8 or 10 days ago and are now developing symptoms of infection. So the next few days represent some very difficult decisions for people.
Okay, Dr. Alison McGeer, thank you for that.
Pleasure. Take care.
You too.